Thank you everyone for taking the time today to attend this webinar where we will be discussing approaches to how organisations can engage their first-line deskless workforces. My name is David Salter. I'm the Director of Technology Solutions at LiveTiles based in New York City, and I'm joined today by my colleague John Wesley. John, please say hello.
Hello everyone, John Wesley here. I'm a Senior Solutions Specialist at LiveTiles. I'm based in the mid-Michigan area.
Thanks, John. Folks, just in the interest of time and to keep this very short and sharp, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the information in the slide deck will be distributed after the webinar. What we're really focusing on today from a product perspective is an application called LiveTiles Reach, which is an application that supports targeted channel-based communications of different types, and it is purpose-built for the first-line workforce use case across a diverse set of industries. And John will actually be talking about some examples from some of our clients across those industries later, but it is application for LiveTiles Reach that we are generally referring to in today's webinar. Very quickly, as a company, we offer first-line worker engagement solutions for organisations that have invested in Microsoft 365 as a platform and have licensed their first line for access through tools like Microsoft Teams. And we have also invested in applications that do not require your first line workforce to have a Microsoft 365 license. So that just gives you a bit of context. But on to some of the more important factors now around why this matters. One of the things that has been proven through a number of studies is that companies with highly engaged workforces do outperform their peers. And this is research that has been undertaken not just by Gallup, but by a number of organisations. And it really comes down to one key point for us, and that effective internal communications is the glue that holds organisations together. And that may be at the time of business as usual when things are just rolling along. But what about during times of great transformation? It could be a merger and acquisition. There could be a restructure. The business might be launching a new product or service. There might be an important regulatory or compliance change that people need to be aware of and to take action on. The effectiveness with which you communicate these things out to your people really is what will determine success in many cases. And in summary, without an effective approach to internal communications here, chaos can often occur. So really the problem that we are solving through the technology as the enabler is how to connect your first line workforce to those elements of information that they need to do to work effectively. Just before we jump into some of the capabilities that we regard as absolutely essential to the first line deskless use case, just defining a little bit about the market itself. 2.7 billion people, or 80% of the global workforce, would fall into this category across industries including agriculture, construction, healthcare, hospitality, manufacturing, oil and gas, retail, and of course, transportation. Now, just listing down here, these are just a list of some of the things that I am currently working on with some of our customers as they seek to do a better job engaging with their people. Quite predictable, as you can imagine, but certainly not just limited to these items here. There will, of course, based on the industry or the context of the organisation, be niche applications that need to be factored into this. So what John and I decided to do today was put together 5 tips for communication engagement with the first-line workforce. Number 1 is really that, and we think this is probably the most important, a consumer-grade mobile application with push notifications is really for us a non-negotiable. We don't really see how in the year 2020 you can roll out an application that is sort of okay on a mobile, but not great. And the reason that we say that really comes from the way that people interact with technology in their consumer lives. Their mobile banking app is a very slick experience. Their favorite news website is a very slick experience. And of course, a number of disparate communication tools that they use to communicate with family and friends. That is the expectation. So recommendation number 1 is that whatever you put in place, ensure that the mobile experience is consumer grade and first class, and that it supports things that people expect, like push notifications, which are actually very important from an information flow perspective. Number 2 is that less is more, and to focus on simplicity and, importantly, quality of content. One of the experiences that John and I have had with working with many organisations with first-line workforces is that there's often this tendency to try and recreate everything that exists in the world of the corporate intranet for everyone in the field. And what we actually find when we do requirement studies is that the field just doesn't need that much. The field has a series of very core needs, and really what you should focus on when implementing a solution is the top things that are important for them. Now, it could be safety information. It could be design documentation for people who are working in construction or engineering. Focusing on the things that are absolutely most important, nailing them, and then you can slowly add the other elements over time. But what we recommend against is trying to boil the ocean and implementing too much of the corporate information world into the application for the first line. Treating internal and external people with the same importance. When we talk about first-line workforces, we're not just referring to employees. We could be referring to contractors, vendors, suppliers. Very common, of course, in industries where people are brought in for contracts, but you still need to communicate with them across many different dimensions. We think it's important that you select an application where it is equally as easy to communicate with your employees as it is with those external employees, and that it's not just easy, but that you treat the quality of the content and the information with the same level of importance. We also think number 4 here is that to some extent you should enable all employees to be content creators within a certain governance regimen there. We're not suggesting that everyone should be able to create whatever they want, but we do think that allowing people who are in the field, who do have very deep expertise in a particular area, to be able to share in a peer-to-peer way is of critical importance. And then finally, number 5, something that we think is very obvious, is to measure the impact of what you are creating. Of course, that is important to know what people are reading, what they're not reading, what they're finding useful, what they're not finding useful. And that is the information that will allow you to iteratively improve. 5 features that we think you should be looking for in software for communicating with the first line. Number 1 really lends itself into the consumer grade mobile app experience, and that is around announcements and alerts. They should be audience targeted and channel based to ensure relevancy. An app experience for everyone is an app experience for no one. You need to ensure that the content that you're pushing out is relevant to people based on their role, their geography, their department, etc. And alerts play a very important role here in ensuring that there is a flow of information between the creator and the person who is receiving it, and being aware that this is something they need to read. And of course, that ties itself into selecting software that allows people to confirm that they have read and understood something. For example, an important update to a safety protocol. Finally, as it relates to the mobile app and announcements and alerts, you may be a global company with people all around the world. It is very inefficient to create content in one language, perhaps English, and then have to manually translate it into many other languages. So the LiveTiles Reach application, which we will share shortly and which you will all be invited to a free trial of, has fully automated translation across, it says 40 there, but we've now got 60 languages. We think that if you're a global company with a large distributed workforce around the globe, that this is something that you should factor in. We just talked about, updates and announcements. These are bits of information that alert people to something that's changed in the moment. But of course, there's going to be information, things like training documentation, policies, procedures that may update occasionally, but generally speaking will remain constant through time. So some way to store in a logical, organized information architecture with a logical taxonomy of content, structured knowledge. So let's call that web pages. That's number 2 that we think the application should support. Unstructured knowledge sharing flows on from that, not as structured as a logical taxonomy of sites and pages that you may experience within a mobile application, for example, but a way for people with expertise in a particular field to share what they know and to collaborate with colleagues. Certainly something that we recommend. A bit of a no-brainer here is connecting expertise with a directory experience, and importantly, not just a directory experience that gives people access to basic content, contact details, but a directory experience that really does 2 additional things for the field. Number 1 is it actually allows them to update their specific expertise in the context of their work to make themselves discoverable to colleagues. It could be a particular set of engineering skills, to take one example for the field, but importantly to have an approach to prompting and reminding people to keep that information up to date, to keep themselves discoverable and valuable within the organization. So that is something that our software is able to offer. And finally, one of the things that we know about field workers is that you need to keep them engaged with some level of connectivity to what's going on in HQ in the corporate offices. Now that can be through training sessions, it can be through briefings, through town halls, etc. And we would recommend that whatever software you select supports the organisation and management of those events and integrates seamlessly with conferencing tools that people will be already familiar to using, whether it's things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And importantly, in the same way that you gather feedback through analytics on how well applications are being adopted, that you do the same for these training events. You get feedback on whether it was useful, what was, what wasn't, so that you can improve it into the future. Just before we jump into a quick demo, I'm just going to hand over to my colleague John to talk about some real world applications that we are dealing with at the moment with a few of our clients. John.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, so, as you walk through, obviously, those elements really resonate with a few industries. In some of the projects I have and am currently working in. And the first one that really jumps out is construction and manufacturing. Typically, these are large workforces that don't necessarily have the dedicated M365 license. So typically they are reliant on things like SMS-based text push or emails that may be going into a connected Azure corporate email account, but more than likely it's going into their personal email or their let's just call it their Gmail account for their contractor company, for example. But as you really begin to peel the layers back, in the context of whether you're on a construction job site or you're within a manufacturing plant, being able to have somebody broadcast important news through a consumer-grade mobile app that's very targeted is an incredibly powerful thing. So, for example, a safety incident has occurred, right? Whether it be a hazardous material spill on a job site or within a plant. Just being able to, as you showed on one of the images, the red banner, the alert, the broadcast, the message that goes out in a very communicated or dedicated communication channel is of critical importance. Job sites with the peer-to-peer coordination, I've seen them become a godsend for when deliveries are coming in and there is something blocking, whether it be somebody's vehicle or something else, to then use the unstructured peer-to-peer communication to kind of do a quick post, take a picture right there from their phone and upload it into the environment and say, hey, whoever belongs to this item that's in the way, we really need you to come move it, and other critical notices. I hate to, harp on the same topic, but COVID has really changed the way people are interacting with these technologies. Being able to go into the structured information center as you have subcontractors and vendors entering job sites, to always have access to that COVID form that all of us have become accustomed to as things have opened up, right? Have you traveled? Have you been near anybody? Typically those things are saved on a, kiosk type computer or saved onto an iPad, where now they have access to it in the context of the site or the channel, which means you can have different versions of it if the different regulatory requirements are different from site to site. Moving down the list, retail and hospitality, incredibly critical, because in this regard, there is well over a 95% chance that the individuals you need to communicate with are really just using a cell phone and their personal email account. Yeah. They don't have the dedicated licensing. So being able to have these individuals self-register through the use of the Azure B2C connector and not have to rely on a Microsoft license, to now have these very location-specific details and information, whether it be OSHA postings, state-required operating guidelines, whatever the case may be. They have an effective way to communicate in an industry that typically has a very high turnover rate. Healthcare, not to belabor some of the same points, they have unique challenges of where they need quick access to critical information. So those structured knowledge areas and the events become very important. So whether it be training events or critical announcements, or even that quick peer-to-peer communication for individuals that are constantly moving and need that dedicated quick access, they highly leverage this to be able to remain informed and attend. And then finally, within the legal sector, typically your lawyers, your legals, your paralegals are individuals that are constantly moving. They're on the go. They need access to the necessary relevant information. So the targeted context as well as the skills directory becomes of paramount importance to be able to find the individuals with the right skill set that have access to the right information. So that's just, I could go on much longer.
Yes, and one of the things we welcome everyone to do is get in touch, and we can share information about the work we're doing with clients in different industries with large first-line worker user bases. Very quickly, and wrapping up shortly, there's really two approaches that we at LiveTiles offer to meeting these requirements depending on your tech constraints. Number one is, if you are in an organization that is fully committed to Microsoft 365 and you have chosen to license everybody for that, so for example, access to Teams, then we have developed a first-line worker solution called Reach that is able to be surfaced in Teams. So the individual accesses it through their Teams app, and then it adds a whole lot of capability that doesn't come with Teams around targeted channel-based communication, news, formal curated content in the form of web pages, directory, etc. So that's option one. Option two is if you are not committed to 365, or if you have a section of people who do have 365 licenses, and then a section of the workforce that do not. What we're able to do is actually have a centralized publishing hub where content can be created in one location and pushed both to people with Microsoft licensing and without any need to duplicate the content. It can be pushed out to a freestanding mobile app for iOS and Android. I'm just going to quickly demonstrate this. I'm just going to come over and change what I am presenting. John, are you able to see my screen here?
I have the PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll need to change that over to the app. I'm going to share. And John, you should now be seeing this.
Got it. I see Reach in Teams, David. Great.
So as I mentioned, option one, if you are an organization that wants to deliver this through 365, then we have developed LiveTiles Reach for Teams. And what we encourage you to do is get in touch with us for a demo and a trial. It is something that can be trialed very, very easily to assess whether it's going to meet your needs. And you will see all of the capabilities ranging from news, posts, pages, and indeed integrations that we can do with other business applications. Finally, this is the publishing dashboard where people create the targeted channel-based communications that go out to the field. And then this is a preview of the mobile experience in the independent iOS Android app that is available for users. And you can just see me clicking through here. But as I mentioned, we would really encourage you to get in touch with us for a discovery session that addresses the specific needs that your organization has, and will allow John and I and our broader team to put something very targeted together. So I'll just bring this back up, but please do get in touch with John and I for that discovery session where we'll talk about your needs, and also for the potential for a free trial of the software. But in closing, thank you very much for your time today. John and I are looking forward to answering any questions that you may have. And if not, please don't hesitate to be in touch with us shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.